Brexit, the political decision that divided a nation. Should we remain a part of the EU or not? This was the decision that every UK citizen had to make. Some saw the departure from the EU as a potential solution to the UK's issues, while others feared it could lead to disaster. Which perspective has proven to be more accurate? How is the UK faring in 2024, and what are its citizens' views on Brexit now? Without wasting any more time, let's get into it. Before we can discuss the current state of Brexit and the UK, let's take a stroll down memory lane and go over the history of Brexit. 1973 marked a significant turning point for the UK. It was the year when the UK, filled with enthusiasm and a spirit of collaboration, decided to join the precursor to the EU, the European Economic Community, also known as the EEC. This decision was a testament to the UK's willingness to work hand in hand with their neighbors to boost trade, build stronger relationships, and modernize their economy. But the honeymoon period was short-lived. Just 2 years later, a significant portion of the UK had a change of heart about the EEC. In 1975, a referendum was held, and the UK decided to stick with the EEC. Spoiler alert, they stayed. However, this idea of leaving remained in many citizens' minds, and in 2016, they got their next chance to leave potentially. The Prime Minister, David Cameron, had backed himself into a corner with low levels of votes coming his way. The only solution he saw as viable was to hold another referendum on the UK's position within the EU. Many warnings of serious economic risks were given to those who insisted on leaving. Still, with slogans such as "Take Back Control" being plastered everywhere, this spoke to many UK citizens. With an increase in populism, immigration concerns, nationalism, and discontent with the political establishment, Leavers won the majority vote with 52%. The UK immediately felt the effects of Brexit, with the valuation of its currency, the pound sterling, reaching a 31-year low against the dollar, its largest intraday collapse in 30 years. There was a lot of uncertainty around the Brexit negotiations, which continued to weigh heavily on the currency. January 31st, 2020, the UK officially left the EU. From then on, the UK and EU entered a transition period where the two parties would discuss how future trading relationships would work. There was a lot of fear and anxiety around the possible introduction of tariffs and quotas if a deal could not be reached before the deadline of December 31st, 2020. Luckily, on December 24th, a deal was finalized between the UK and EU, preventing such fears from becoming a reality. So, how did Brexit affect some of the UK's biggest industries, you may be wondering? I'm so glad you asked because I'm about to tell you. Major banks such as JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, NatWest, and many others were quick to realize the inconveniences they would face if they remained in London. During the transition period, these banks relocated hundreds of employees and large amounts of assets to European cities. UK-based insurers, with companies such as Lloyd's of London and Aviva, were quick to follow. The real thorn in this for UK-based financial institutions was that Brexit had ended the passporting rights of investment houses, allowing companies to register in one EU market and then operate in all other markets. To conduct EU business following Brexit, UK investment banks require equivalence rulings that recognize regulations in a company's home country as sufficiently similar to those of the EU. Unfortunately, the equivalence system does not include most core banking businesses, such as deposit taking, retail investment services, and other lending services. This means UK banks must establish EU offices to continue these activities with EU clients. US banks were no strangers to this concept. They had already possessed access to EU markets, giving them a window of opportunity to draw business away from UK firms until they could establish themselves in the EU. Thanks to Brexit, £1.2 trillion in financial assets and over 7,500 jobs left London post-Brexit. Brexit made big promises about securing significant new trade deals to expand the UK's global trade. So how have they followed up on this? The UK has signed deals and agreements with around 70 countries. These were mostly rollovers of the same trade deals it had in place when it was still part of the EU. Some new deals have been signed, such as the one with Japan. This deal secured an estimated £15.2 billion increase in trade between the UK and Japan. As of January 2021, the UK officially signed an agreement stating that it is no longer part of the EU single market and the European Common Fisheries Policy. As a result, the UK has signed a trade deal with Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein. UK fleets are very interested in gaining access to Norway's sub-Arctic seas. The EU is still very much a key player for UK exports, with a survey from Make UK 2023 Trade Bulletin showing that 74% of surveyed companies still export to the EU post-Brexit. However, trading with the EU these days is a much more laborious task, given all the extra steps a post-Brexit world offers. This same survey found that 40% of manufacturers reported decreasing exports to the EU. A curious thing to note is that in 2022, the monetary value of exports had increased while volume levels still remained below pre-Brexit levels. Inflation is seen as a big reason for the increased monetary value. Exporting certain goods to the EU requires a CE marking. Pre-Brexit, acquiring this marking for UK businesses was fairly simple. Now, they must open an office within Europe to get a postcode, which can then be used to receive a CE marking. It's not just the EU that is looking for this marking either. A lot of international businesses want to see products they purchase to have this marking, as it is seen as safe. A new change for businesses exporting to the EU is now that they are no longer a part of the EU single market. This means declarations at customs and VAT representatives. Each country within the EU a UK business is exporting to now requires them to have a VAT representative, and each country has their own specific regulations. This has led to increased paperwork and costs for exporting businesses. Many businesses have noted that EU companies are becoming less and less inclined to deal with the UK. Adrian Hanrahan, managing director of Robinson Brothers, a medium-sized chemical producer, claims that he heard it straight from the horse's mouth at an industry trade conference. 2 German and a Belgian customers spoke directly with Adrian saying, "Sorry, Adrian, we know you do a great job, but dealing with the UK is just too much trouble now." Politicians seem to have differing views on trade, though. Kemi Badenoch claims it is false to say Brexit has had a major impact on UK-EU trade. Rishi Sunak believes that Brexit has given them greater freedom and a stronger competitive edge. The farming sector does not seem to be happy about this post-Brexit world. Farmers are having real issues around the new deals with New Zealand, Australia, and the CPTP deal with a number of countries such as Canada and Mexico. They believe the imports from these countries undergo a lack of checks, allowing substandard food to enter the country. There's also anger around the fact that many European farmers still receive subsidies from the EU and can import their goods across the channel. Farmers claim this puts them at a major disadvantage compared to European farmers. Save British Farming organized a Go Slow protest of more than 120 tractors in Westminster, demanding action be taken against these issues and ensure food security in the country. The farming protests that took place earlier in the year contributed to the government's decision to introduce new customs charges. These new fees will take effect on April 30th. They state that low-risk goods will be charged £10 and mixed consignments will be charged up to £145. Trade bodies were quick to express their disapproval. They fear these new charges will increase consumers' prices and ultimately limit their choices as European suppliers pull out of the UK. Marco Forgione, Director General of the Institute of Export and International Trade, stated, "With April 30th fast approaching, this is another hammer blow to the work being done to get the news out about new border checks, adding more confusion to the message." His main worries about these charges are that small and medium-sized businesses will be hit the hardest, with entire profits potentially wiped out, resulting in decreased trade with smaller businesses from the EU. The flat common user charge has been introduced to cover the costs of veterinary and health inspections on animal and plant products. Currently, it is £29 per consignment for medium and high-risk products of both animal and plant origin, while low-risk animal products will be charged £10 and plant products will be free of charge. Business groups are again riddled with anxiety because these consignments are not charged based on their size, which will negatively affect smaller importers. Smaller importers are also more likely to use mixed consignments as they can share the burden with other firms, as both use the exact container or lorry for a consignment. To mitigate fears of multiple charges being layered onto a mixed consignment, a cap of 145 pounds on total costs has been put in place. In some cases, this capped amount may have to be paid multiple times, depending on the delivery truck's origin and destination. Trade groups have warned that these charges could prevent food inflation from falling further, as these levies will be passed on to consumers. Annual UK food price inflation topped 19% in March 2023, the highest rate in 45 years, and stood at more than 10% as recently as October. By February, it had eased to 5%. This can result in many smaller European exporters deciding that sending goods to the UK isn't worth it because of these extra new charges. It is highly unlikely that the majority of products within supermarkets will be affected by this. However, niche and specialist products such as cheeses will face the brunt of these charges. The government has implemented these charges to help finance post-Brexit border facilities, arguing that they will pose no real significance to the cost of food and drink. They believe there will only be a 0.2% increase in total over 3 years. They have also decided this is the best course of action to take because they would rather have some minor increases in food and drink products due to veterinary and health inspections that will prevent an outbreak from occurring, causing far more damage to the economy. There is anxiety around just-in-time inventory systems being affected by friction at the border from these checks and charges. What if lorries end up getting stuck behind someone else who doesn't have the correct paperwork? What happens if import regulations aren't operating smoothly? These are all issues that can add up to time and costs in deliveries, ultimately making the end product more expensive for the consumer. This doesn't just make transporting products across the border difficult, it also makes it a challenge for people to cross the border. UK citizens will need visas to travel in the EU. Whereas it was a simple procedure for people to travel from the UK to the EU before, now it is a time-consuming, paper-intensive process. Brexit has presented numerous challenges and disruptions across different sectors of the UK economy. While some trade deals have been secured and the UK has gained greater freedom, the exodus of financial assets, concerns about increased consumer prices, and the challenges faced by various industries suggest that the overall success of Brexit remains uncertain. The long-term impact of these changes will continue to shape the UK's economic landscape, and whether the benefits will outweigh the challenges posed by Brexit remains to be seen. We have now reached the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed the video and have a good day further.